this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be playing some more Soul Character Found. If you don't know, that's when I take a fresh character on a fresh file, take it from level 1 all the way to 300 corruption in about 1.5 days worth of time. This is to test cycle starter capabilities and to figure out what I'm going to be playing next patch, because I want to test a very large amount of builds in a very short amount of time. So this time it's going to be Infernal Shade Lich. This is actually an update to a build that I played around 2 years ago. That is because we recently found some new tech for Infernal Shade. Now, if you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that is the best way of currently supporting me and to show me that you want more content like this on YouTube. Now, of course, Infernal Shade Lich. What happened? What's going on? That is because, like, as you can see, there's a lot of explosions going on. I've actually played a few builds now that rely on explosions. The last 3 builds I have, and this one is no different. Now we have 4 builds in the explosion tier list. Let's keep making explosion builds, shall we? I love explosions. So what's happening here is we are abusing the node inside Infernal Shade that causes an explosion at the end of its duration. Now, normally, if we were to wait for its duration normally, it's a very, what do you call it, a balance skill, because it takes forever to actually pop. Now, it has really large damage multipliers in its tree, as you can see with this node, that gives it 200% more damage, but because of the fact that you have to wait for the duration, it makes it very poo-poo, very bad. But, thankfully, there's a way around this. There is a behavior with this skill. That main behavior is if you apply Infernal Shade to an enemy and that enemy dies, right, during the Infernal Shade, right, then it explodes at the end. Because, like, what else would it do? Would it sit there on the ground? No, we don't have the set on the ground node. So that means that, like, you know, it would go in nowhere, and then the build would it wouldn't function at all. Like, the skill wouldn't function at all if, you know, the Infernal Shade kept going, or if the Infernal Shade just poofed. So it's better that it explodes, but we can abuse this functionality. That is because when we apply it to our minions and they die an unfortunate death, that counts as the as a kill technically for Infernal Shade. That means that, of course, it pops at the end of the minion's life, so we can actually prematurely pop our Infernal Shades with great, like, effect. As you can see in the video, the idea is we summon a zombie that applies Infernal Shade to itself or somewhere else, right, to someone else usually. Then that zombie will go and suicide, and then pop the Infernal Shade it has, and then apply Infernal Shade to the next zombie. So as you can see, I'm essentially creating a conga line of zombies, and they're, you know, applying Infernal Shade to each other, and they're popping as they're killing themselves, and this leads to a very large amount of explosions. Now, this actually is outscaling the Hungering Souls on my bar. That is because I'm not doing the minion stuff where you get 150% more damage and all that. So this is actually very close to the Infernal Shade Hungering Soul Lich that I played like 2 years ago. In that version of the build, we were trying to make Infernal Shade deal spell damage over time to, you know, help out Hungering Souls with clear, but now we're just using Infernal Shade for everything. That's because Infernal Shade is just freaking beast now with this specific setup, because, you know, you have a 200% more multiplier here, a 60% more multiplier here, 60% more multiplier here. But what broke the camel's back, what made this build insanely viable and really good, is the fact that Blaze Shade specifically works with the pop at the end. So if you don't know, Blaze Shade is a node that gives you a 20% chance to create a much larger Infernal Shade, and this also can get a massive multiplier on top of it. Like, I'm talking like a fat, juicy multiplier on top of it, and that is a 20% chance, and 20% of the time my Infernal Shade covers the entire screen. And if you actually care about the AoE of the Infernal Shade, you could actually make the thing absolutely humongous. I've actually taken some notes to reduce the AoE to give me more damage, because as you can tell, we have plenty of AoE. And it feels amazing. This build feels absolutely amazing. The idea is you just keep summoning zombies, and they are heat-seeking missiles, and they go explode everywhere for us, and it's just amazing. And of course, we get to utilize double cycle putrescence, which gives us essentially, when we're at 6 zombies, a 30% chance to summon another zombie. So using both these rings is another 60% more damage multiplier. And one of the more interesting things about this build currently is the fact that it has really large scalability. So for instance, in Merchant's Guild, right, I only have a 2 LP Firestar's Torch on right now. Now it did roll the right modifiers, thank God, thank the Lord. This time around, it was like 1.5 days worth of playtime, so I was hoping the Firestar's Torch actually hit, which it did. But in MG, like, getting a 4 LP Firestar's Torch is like really easy in terms of currency. It's like very cheap early on. That's because Firestar's Torch is a very low item level item. That means we can get a 4 LP one very easily. We could utilize Calamity with LP on it to get even more ignite chance. We can utilize a Soulfire with LP to get more ignite chance. Essentially, what I'm saying here is this build scales really, 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 really hard. Right now, I'm getting like, I think like 300 to 400k ticks at my maximum currently on this build, because of the way Lich works. It's like you have a high DPS and a low DPS. That's because of Death Seal currently and Reperform and all that. But with the advent of Merchant's Guild, you can make this build go to the moon in terms of DPS. This is like one of those builds that you can keep dumping currency in for like the next like 3 months, and it would still not be finished by the time you're done. So if you're the kind of person that likes to build like that, this is the build for you, because you can go to the absolute moon. Like my cycles of Putrescence, they only have 0 LP. They could have 2 LP. They could have LE dot and HP. They could have lots more than what I currently have. So one downside of this build, though, specifically, is this is a lot of mana that we're consuming. We're summoning a bunch of zombies. We're using a bunch of Infernal Shades. Thankfully, our Infernal Shades only cost us like 4 mana each right now, thanks to the way that they interact with zombie. But our zombies are like 16 mana each, and that's about as low as we can get them. So we do need to build some amount of mana regen, but thankfully EHG has given us a very large amount of mana regen in the game in general. You can get it everywhere. The only reason that my mana regen is not 0, that is well, my mana regen is not, like enough, and that is because we don't have mana regen on our cycles. We don't have mana regen like everywhere else. Like we only have mana regen in very specific spots. You can get a mana regen prefix on our Firestar's Torch. That would help a lot as well. There's a lot of different ways we get more mana regen in Merchant's Guild, but in a short 2-day process, you definitely cannot do that. And that's what's surprising about this build, is I played it for like 2 days, and it's really, really, really fucking strong. So I'm really hoping to play this build again when I play Merchant's Guild, and to Gucci-fy the fuck out of it. At least that's my current plan. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. Now let's go in game and talk about the build more in detail, shall we? All right, here we are in game with the character. Let's go over the skills, shall we? So for specifically summon volatile zombie, the most important things is we grab the mana efficiency so we can actually spam zombies. The summoning speed also increases the clear, because the faster they come out, the faster they can go and hit targets. Getting the 16% coal is massive on bosses. This essentially reduces every boss's HP by 16%, and it's great. Very good thing to have. Grabbing a bunch of movement speed here, more movement speed and increased movement speed per missing health. This is really good for clear as well, because they'll pop up on you, they'll start decaying, and then they'll just rush towards the enemy and explode. Very entertaining, very good, absolutely wonderful. Then we eventually grab 4 points into Effigy of Combustion. This is mandatory, as it reduces Infernal Shade's mana cost by 50%. So instead of a 6 mana cost Infernal Shade, we're actually spending a 3 mana Infernal Shade currently, which is really cool, really good. And this actually goes up higher if we take off our torch here. It goes up to 12 without our torch. So having this is very, very, very good. Just reduces mana cost overall, and makes it so that whenever we actually cast Infernal Shade, as you can see there, it is not very much mana at all. It's mainly just, summon zombie. That's most of our mana, right? So cool. Now, let's talk about Infernal Shade, shall we? Infernal Shade, so this requires very specific nodes to function. Swapping into this early on is very hard, so I would suggest like leveling the way that I put in the description and trying to wait until you have access to Combustion and Devour in Flames at the same time. These two nodes are required for the build to function, otherwise the mechanics don't really work and it feels awful. And of course we're grabbing all of the more damage here, and then the more damage here. Eventually, we'd like to grab the more damage here, and if for some reason we had a bunch of plus levels, we could also grab the fire penetration with ignite, but that's like asking for a lot. You don't necessarily need that. It just would be cool. But essentially, filling out all these more damage modifiers and then filling out this more damage modifier would be insanely strong if you had plus levels to Infernal Shade, which I currently do not. You can get it on the relic here, get like a +4 in Infernal Shade, and that would give us a gigantic damage boost. Another node that we're utilizing is Blade Shade. Like I said, 20% for a Blade Shade, get a large area of effect and also more Blade Shade damage. This actually applies to the ignites applied by said explosion by said Blade Shade. So I can show you here. When we get that bigger one, yeah, that big one, whenever it's that big one, that's our Blaze Shade. And that deals a lot more damage and a much bigger AoE. That makes our clear absolutely amazing, because essentially if you were to boil this down to right, this would be around, I think, about a 90% more damage modifier overall to our DPS just by grabbing these two nodes. So of course they're definitely worth it. Now for Hungering Souls, it actually kind of takes a back seat to this version of the build instead of the other version where it's mandatory. Mainly all we care about is the 40% more damage over time versus Spreading Flames. This is actually really cool while leveling. I mean, well, not while leveling, but like while clearing. That's because we have Spreading Flames on hit, and that Spreading Flames actually spreads, right? And as it spreads on targets, it actually gives us the more damage modifier from the more fire damage affected by Spreading Flames. And whenever we cast Inspired Hunger, it lasts for 8 seconds, so we deal more damage to anything with Spreading Flames from our Firestarter's Torch and our Inspired Hunger. So getting both of those means that like our clear is absolutely amazing. Like our single target and clear are one. We don't have like a difference between like our clear damage and our single target damage, which is absolutely amazing. I'm gonna grab the rest of the more damage here, more damage here. Eventually, when you want to get plus levels to Hungering Souls, which you can get on the helmet later on, you can actually put points into Grave Bond. This is actually really strong. As you can tell, I always have a minion for the most part, so this would give them a 60% more damage multiplier. That'd be absolutely insane, and that would be like really good. And maybe if for some reason you had a few extra points, you could put it in here, but generally it's a utility setup. It is cool though that we can cast Death Seal and have it cast automatically for us. That's a lot of extra free damage on single target, so grabbing the 60% more damage would be nice. Reperform, all we care about, cast speed. We care about, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. That should be 4 points. Eventually you want to intelligence stack with a build like this, mainly so that, you know, we could actually get 4 points of armor per intelligence. That's a lot of extra armor, even with this measly 24 intelligence I have, because as you can see when I put everything up, very large amounts of armor very quickly. So grabbing this is really good. You know, the Reap and Transplant cooldown stuff, and the Mark for Death is very important. Mark for Death is really good. That is because on our tree we actually have Leech against cursed enemies. Eventually, once you get to like level 100, you can fill this out, and this on top of all the Leech here and the Leech for being an Acolyte, all that combined means that, you know, you're going to be sustaining very quickly, and like just having 30% pen on top of that's very good as well, because we're getting a lot, because you can see we do a lot of explosions. Death Seal, stereotypical Death Seal setup. There's really not much to talk about. It's literally the same Death Seal setup that I've been running for a very long time now. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Let's talk about blessings real quick. So we're running Ignite here, very strong. Here eventually you'd run Lightning Res. Here we actually run Bleed Chance. We actually want to run Bleed Chance empowered. That is because we're running a Malin's Hubris, and that is extra Bleed Chance for us in total, which is really good, by the way. Then Armor here, in armor here to make us tankier for more armor, and that's pretty much it for blessings. Let's talk about gear that's mandatory. Mandatory gear. There's actually technically no mandatory gear to get this started, but I would heavily suggest rushing for a Fire Starter's Torch first, even without any LP. This is very strong. You definitely want this early on. Then eventually, like, you can get it with like mana regen, the spell minus mana costs, and like ignite on hit and like fire penetration, or that would all work. That would all be very good. Then the next few items you should be focusing on is like a Malin's Hubris, so you can convert Bleed Chance to Ignite. As you can see, we actually have a very large amount of Bleed Chance on us. That's because Lich in general gets a lot of Bleed Chance from sources like this. We get Bleed Chance from the Lich tree as well. And all this Bleed Chance can be converted into Ignite Chance for profit for us. So yeah, Malin's Hubris is the next thing you'd get. The next thing I would focus on is trying to get Double Cycle of Putrescence. Essentially what this does is it makes it so that we have a bunch of extra zombie summons for free. As you can see, whenever we go over max, we actually pop Infernal Shade quicker. So as you can see, we actually get a very large amount of explosions because of Double Cycle. It also makes it, while we're clearing in the monolith, it actually makes it like very comfy, because I'll be like walking through the monolith and stuff and constantly having explosions happen. So this is very cool, very nice. And you can also get LP on these eventually. Now, I don't believe you actually necessarily need cycles of Putrescence. You could just drop these and just run more damage on your rings. That's really up to you. Either way, like, it doesn't really matter. Both options, I think, are fine. Then eventually Fiery Dragon Shoes, because not only does it reduce the bonus damage taken we take, it also gives us 34% fire penetration with Ignite. That's really good, by the way. And that's pretty much it for the unique mandatory gear. Let's talk about the rest. Here, you would eventually want plus 4 to Hungering Souls instead of the Vitality there, but otherwise is a good helmet in general. Without the, even the base is pretty good too, because mana regen is important for us. Then for the amulet here, mana regen, LE dot, HP resistance, very good amulet. Probably could get CLT1 frailty as well. Chest here, bleed chance, HP, and then eventually you can get shared fire damage, or you can get intelligence. Intelligence is a good option as that gives us a lot of armor. Make sure to use a very high armor base. And of course, shield, health, res, block, and then eventually block chance later on, make us tankier. Then this could actually be swapped out for that one Weaver's Well shield if you have one with good modifiers, but I would suggest going for one with HP first if you're going to swap into that. Belt here, HP, LE dot, mana regen on the armor base instead of this, but it's very close to what we would want. And for the relic here, mana regen, LE dot, resistance, frailty, or whatever. This is a very good base, but you do want plus 4 to Infernal Shade. Plus 4 to Infernal Shade would give you a very large amount of damage. You can grab nodes and fanning the flames. That's another 32% more damage modifier, while also giving us a lot of area. So both that combined would be really good. And of course, you could put in more points here. Like overall, plus 4 would be insanely strong right now if you had it here. And for idols, I'm just going to run HP idols everywhere. It's just more efficient to run HP idols everywhere, and maybe a few resistance idols here or there. There's no specific idols that you want because we're not overloading, so we don't need the damage over time or whatever, or the percent damage. So just running HP idols so that you can scale your HP into the end game is preferable. And eventually you could get a Throne of Ambition. I've actually been farming Stolen Lance, and I don't have a Throne of Ambition. That would be an easy 40% more damage modifier and 40% more armor. That would be insane on single target, so eventually a Throne of Ambition would be a good idea. Now, with all that being said, actually I did not talk about passives, but there's like no passives that are specifically important. Like, they're pretty obvious, I'll be honest, in terms of passives this time around. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye!